In discussions of classical Japanese cinema, Mikio Naruse usually ranks a convenient footnote behind the internationally recognized Ozu, Mizoguchi, and Kurosawa. Though popular inland, his style, or perceived lack thereof, was seen as incompatible with Western audiences, perhaps best exemplified by the circumspective reaction to his film Wife, Be Like a Rose, which was the first Japanese film to be screened in the US in 1936. So, on first glance, he did not seem to have either the vigor of Kurosawa, the formal beauty of Mizoguchi, or the sublimated simplicity of Ozu, but his feel for the pulse of society remains unmatched by those three masters, or by anyone for that matter. Naruse worked between 1930 and 1967. He primarily made everyday dramas about ordinary people, his genre of choice the Shoshimin-eiga. Often spearheaded by a torn female protagonist, be that a wife, mother, widow, or daughter-in-law, who finds herself entrapped by the social order she's serving, yet fights to scrape meaning or sense in her existence. Throughout his career, he worked with virtually all of Japan's leading actresses, ranging from Kinuyo Tanaka, Setsuko Hara, to lastly Hideko Takamine, with whom he would make the bulk of his films, and whom he turned into a star in the early 40s. Imbuing in her characters a constant, convulsive conflict between toughness and vulnerability, sensitivity and brashness, interiority and exteriority, which gives the impression of watching individuals rather than representatives, as one would in Mizoguchi. While their place is popular entertainment, Naruse's films are also melodramatic, and in respect beholden to the Hollywood woman's picture. Far from deprecatory, melodrama serves a special function, there as in here, in Cirque as in Naruse, namely that of laying bare the contradictions within a given society, directly bringing out the repressed, that which can no longer be subdued under everyday routine. Naruse's cinema is one embedded in the woes of everyday realism and the inherent melodrama inside of it. Miguel Marias adds, in lieu of the Cirque, Menelli's, Naruse eschews additional dramatism, pathos, and destiny, elements that, in regular melodramas, would yield a cathartic conclusion. Instead, his is of the leisured kind that sees ambivalent, occasionally disheartening, inconclusive endings. Naruse's films are contemporary, modern, and by extension centered around the clash between modernity and tradition, one which had beleaguered Japan, as it did so many other countries. Found in the slow dissolution of various traditional institutions and customs, such as the family and marriage, that nevertheless carry with them some power, both obstructing and engendering the emergence of a female subjectivity, whereby women attempt to break through the objectified barriers of the social order and become subject. Many of Naruse's films build towards what Russell hailed utopian modernism, a dialectics between utopian desires of social extrication and ideological realities which undermines it. The question of female subjectivity is thus at the forefront, solved through a confrontation between the two. Comparisons to Ozu appear superficially apt, given the ostensible likeness of subject matter and genre the two share. Ozu too excelled at the home drama, and like Naruse stayed loyal to it throughout the decades. Naruse started his career at the same studio that housed Ozu, Fuchiko, where he was let go by studio heads who felt similar. "We don't need a second Ozu," they said. In spite of this, they're fairly different, which Naruse's post-Fuchiko career illustrates. For one, Naruse's films are open, whereas Ozu's are relatively closed. The potential for possibility and change in spite of all hardship, when natural progress briefly halts, is integral to Naruse, as opposed to the adherence to ritual and tradition as we find it in Ozu, whose characters are bound to litany. Ozu is a transcendentalist. Though this is not meant to diminish his critical side of said traditions, his characters achieve a sublimation from their resignation to fate, whereas Naruse is a materialist. His characters are grounded in material culture, may fight it, may acquiesce, may resign. His films are of disillusionment, of survival over transcendence. As Audibok writes, there are no happy endings for Naruse, but they're incredibly enlightened defeats. Catherine Russell compares Naruse's repast to Ozu's early summer. In this film of a dissatisfied wife momentarily leaving her husband to visit home in Tokyo, possibility for a different future is still existent, albeit never materialized, where in Ozu's early summer, the ritualistic forces maintain. It is true that the wife submits to the role of housewife and meretricious middle-class existence by the end, but she does have a day-long struggle as a final gesture to potentially gain some new meaning in her life, previously hidden. Naruse's art is one of portraying conflicts that have not yet erupted and become irreversible. He's interested in the small discouragements and unpleasantries of family life, and frequently uses the generic elements of the home drama, not to celebrate them in their homeliness, but to question their very position. Women walk sapped cities, errant children and peevish in-laws, arrange meetings and meals and marriages, toil for stupendous hours, and yet never ever seem to get anywhere. Kit Duckworth writes of A Wife's Heart, a film that exemplifies Naruse's eye for the everyday materiality. Russell and Duckworth describe it as a film in which nothing happens, a black void of emotion that serves as Naruse's statement. Mother serves as another example thereof, the sketch-like narrative focusing on everyday worries and the resulting schism between mother and daughter, eventually denigrating into the daughter's active machinations against her mother. The drama never erupts, but its antagonisms are unavoidable. Like Mother, many of Naruse's Shoshimin dramas play within the confines of the home and the emerging spatial conflict that results out of their domestic dissatisfaction. In A Woman's Sorrows, the oppressive architecture of the Japanese household stands in clash with the family that inhabits it. It evinces a clash between the ideality and reality of Japanese architecture. On one hand, the space as an organized whole, avowing a belief in the primacy of the family, yet on the other, the realization of its falseness. Naruse's interiors are well orchestrated, adorned with modern detail, yet feel threatening and full of malaise. Most pronounced and monumental this divide is in Wife, a story of cyclical bleakness and reciprocated animosity that never yields in divorce between the two. The domestic space, an inn, that she runs due to her husband not earning enough, becomes poisonous, to the point of the two rarely sharing it, and when they do, usually divided within a long shot. The husband is free to move around, travel, visit museums, while the wife is often confined to the limits of the neighborhood. Similar is found in his masterpiece Sound of the Mountain, in which the docile housewife escapes the domestic space only by the film's end, strolling along Shumiko Garden, a pivotal moment, for it signals her trading the adherence to her father-in-law and the obsolescent world he represents for a new freedom, to enter a world not yet liberal, yet open enough for a woman to espouse change and utter their anger. During his silent period, Naruse frequently experimented with quick cross-cutting, forward dollies, and various other techniques. A great example of his early editing is found in Street Without End, in the geometrical cuts as the mother decides to denounce her husband. The rhythmic pattern accentuates her uncertainty, stepping forward, then halting, while the clashing directions show a lack of alternative. All ways lead to the center frame. In the sound films, he would recline his style, solidify his approach, yet the way he continued to edit remained beholden to the idea of movement. He would often cut as a character walks in or out of frame, with slight movements pre and post cut to invoke a sense of transience within the individual shot. Kurosawa, among others, lauded Naruse's smoothness in editing, calling it almost invisible. A byproduct of the so-called looking back aesthetic so common to Naruse films, here he creates momentum by having one character walk forward, then look back towards his partner, which is where he then cut. Though active in editing, Naruse's camera is largely an observing one, allowing drama to naturally emerge out of the daily habits. What matters to Naruse are not large ruptures or histrionic explosions. His films are restrained, where small glances and gestures dominate. These could be as small as a reciprocated gaze, as an averted gaze, or as monumental as a smile. Like the burst in expression of Hara in Sound of the Mountain following 90 minutes of masquerade. Or more dialectically, Sudden Rain's department store sequence, where the wife catches eye of another woman dressed in an elegant kimono. It's a simple glance, but it reveals her self-image, signaling both a moment of deflation and hope for change. We also find it in the burgeoning love of the forlorn souls in Scattered Clouds, achieved entirely through infinitesimal gestures, slowly galvanizing a passion which remains unconsummated due to the realities of the social order that behoves them to remain in solitude. Throughout his career, starting with the silent films, Naruse had been critiqued for his apparent passivity. Through his Shoshimin dramas and serialized adaptations, he nevertheless presented fissures within society without active solution. He laid bare the issue with compassion and acknowledgement of its complexities, but like a philosopher did not dare to repute a salvacious answer. Throughout his career, he had been at the forefront of Japanese modernity, even as he fell out of social discourse in his later years. His films represent the eternal conflict between the old and new, sometimes conciliable, sometimes irreconcilable. His films are dark yet rarely fatalistic. For every resignation to society, there's a vestige of possibility and change within the consciousness of its subjects. Even as opportunities are exhausted and defeat is near, as in Woman Ascends the Stairs, something new is found. That is Naruse's craft. Attaining subjectivity in a world of objectification, dramas of reflection and self-discovery, developing out of the ordinary, slowly building and crescendoing.